Hello, everybody. Welcome to Wednesday and Tilted Bench. It's a beautiful sunny day here in North Carolina. This is our second episode. Happy to be back. We had a great debut last week with Ashley Griffiths. Hey, Rachel. Hey, Trevor. I see Shamila and Robert, Nadine. Hi, everybody. Good to see you guys. With me this week is Patrick Jones. Patrick, thanks for being here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what kind of coaching you do and how you got into it?
Right. I love that music, by the way, man. That intro is real
Yeah,
professional.
thanks.
I'm
Thanks.
into
Thanks.
that.
I spent a fair bit of time looking for it, but I found one I like.
That's fun, man. Yeah. So I am Patrick Jones. I'm a coach for freelancers, specifically freelance writers. And so what we do is how I tend to describe it is like with any business, there are three main skills. There's the skill that you're selling. So in this case, writing. There's the skill of selling the thing. And then there is the skill of evaluating what you're doing. And so I don't teach people how to write. I work on the other two things, the selling and the evaluation. So that's what we focus on in working together. Yeah.
That's awesome. How what is it about that you like doing? Because you have a pretty good background in both, right?
Yeah. So I was a freelancer for just about a decade. I was a freelance musician and writer, and I also did some like art and painting and stuff. I was a real, freelance creative for a number of years, and I never really had that kind of business support. Like I never really considered myself a business owner. I considered myself like a freelancer, and so it was hard for me to achieve the goals I wanted to achieve, right? Like I felt like I was really capped in my income. I didn't like the idea of selling and marketing and that sort of thing. So anyway, so I did that for a number of years and then moved and shifted sort of more into ministry, which is where I think I developed a lot of my coaching skills in chaplaincy. And then got an MBA, did finance and business consulting and stuff, and so kind of merged all of that together to make a program and an idea of coaching that would have helped me 10 or 15 years ago as a freelancer.
Cool. So, I mean, you and I have talked before, and we connected on this kind of ministry background that we both have.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm really interested in like, what's the connection between that chaplaincy work and what you learned doing that versus like what you do now?
Right. Yeah. So I worked in local churches doing music, but the biggest sort of like ministry job I had was doing chaplaincy in a really large retirement community. It was like basically like a small town. I mean, there were tons of buildings and like neighborhoods of shared wall homes and stuff like that. So there were probably, I don't know, 5,000 people total that the chaplain team was responsible for working with. And one of the things that I did was um, welcome the new people who had just moved in. That was like one of my primary jobs. And so in doing that, most of what it was like coaching people through what they're supposed to do now because they had worked so hard and saved money, and they had finally let go of their old house and had moved into this community, and then they got there and they were like, oh, this is what we were working toward, and like now what? They had no idea what to do. So I didn't know it at the time, but it was sort of like, okay, here's the opportunity to decide what you want to do with the next 10 or 20 or 30 years that you're alive.
That's really an awesome opportunity to be able to help people with that kind of those kind of transitions. I mean, transitions are tough, right?
Yeah.
What do you how do you think that played into your kind of understanding of who your ideal client is?
That's interesting. I mean, I've always been, we talk a little bit about spirituality with a lot of my clients, and so that's kind of a component. But I've always really been a creative and been attracted to creatives, and that was the case even there too. You would see a lot of people who retired and then they could pursue the creative things that they had put off for a number of years. And so there's a similar sort of thing there where a lot of the clients that I've worked with were like writers at heart for many years, even if they worked other jobs and stuff. And then they finally got to a point of transition or transformation where they were like, I want to actually pursue this creative thing, and believe that I can make it work. And so very different life stages there, but sort of similar drive in that it's like, I can do this creative thing that I thought I couldn't do, you know?
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for finally, making that leap and like transitioning over to something that you've wanted to do, you've kind of had this passion for, but you haven't tried it yet.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people talk about just the confidence struggles that there are there, that once you make that leap, you've got to really own it and go with it, right? And that's not easy for everybody, especially if it's not something that you have 10, 20, whatever years of experience with.
Yeah.
And you're now talking to people about not only are they now doing that thing, but they have to sell that thing to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to stop for a second and say, I know a few more people have joined us. Hi, everybody. Feel free to drop a hello in the comments. Make yourself known. We don't know who you are if you don't tell us. And as we're going along, if you have any questions for Patrick, any questions about what we're talking about, definitely drop those. We are happy to address those as we can. Patrick, going back to this thing of like confidence, I know that one of the things that you really try and focus on with people is the mindset and kind of thinking about how you think through things, not just what you do. Could you tell us how that works out? What kind of things you do around that?
Yeah. So generally, I group coaching into strategy and mindset. And so, like, some people just offer strategy, some people just offer mindset. A lot of coaches offer a blend of both. And so, I'd say I'm probably, you'd have to ask my clients, but I'm probably want to be 90% mindset and 10% strategy, but realistically, it's probably 60-40 or 70-30. But the main thing that's speaking to like gaining confidence and that sort of thing, it's like our brain just goes around saying sentences to us all the time. And sometimes we throw those sentences away. Sometimes we believe that they are true. And the mindset coaching is really developing the skill of observing the sentence and deciding whether it's useful to you or not. Right. So, like, we think it's going to be hard to make money as a creative, right? Like, that's a really common thing. Like, it's hard to make money as a writer. But when you think about it, that's just a thought that your brain has, and it may or may not be true, right? So, like, if that is true, that would mean basically nobody made a lot of money as a writer, which we know is not the case. Like, we see a lot of people around who make really good money as a writer or as a freelancer of whatever style. And so we have to show our brain, like, well, here are some examples of people who have done it. And so it could be possible for me. And we then kind of build supportive evidence around, like, how is it possible that I could achieve this thing that I thought was going to be really hard or impossible? And that's how we start to really shift the mind and see that there's a lot more possibilities than what we tend to believe at first,
Do you find that those challenges vary in any particular ways based on people's background?
Yeah, that's definitely a component. That's it's actually in the people get caught up in statistics and other people's opinions. Definitely, I do think there's a component to like how you were raised. I talk about that a lot with money. When we talk about money, like, I had, both of my parents are educators, and so we had a lot of scarcity around money. Like, you had to trade. Something my dad always said was like, I get to do a job that I love and I get the summers off, so that means I make less money, right? And I'm like, finally, as an adult, I'm like, but there's no like universal contract that states that, right? Like, that's not a thing that you agreed to. You just decided that that was a reality for you. And so that's definitely something that we talk a lot about, especially around money, like what you inherited from family, from friends, from like the community you grew up in. and sort of shifting to think through like, but what do I really want to believe? Like, what do I really want to think moving forward, and what's going to be productive for me, you know?
Yeah, I really connect with that because like my wife is an academic. She recently transitioned in the industry. I have 2 degrees and then another half of a degree that I never finished. So I'm very comfortable with academia, but there are a lot of mindsets that go along with that, especially higher ed, about money and about what you're supposed to do and what the payoff is. I think about Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad and this whole idea that he has his father who has this kind of mindset around money that's very traditional and pretty limiting versus this other kind of adoptive father that he had who was entrepreneurial, rejected all of those old tried and true mindsets about what money ought to be, how you want to work, how you want to kind of grind out your time for this certain amount of pay. And in academia, you have this idea that you accept even less pay because you get your summers off and because you get to kind of be a part of this academic culture.
Mm-hmm.
And those mindsets can really lock you up.
Yeah.
Um, how early on do you have to combat that with clients? Do you have to kind of hit that right off the bat, or is that something you work into more slowly?
It sort of depends. Normally, where we start to really uncover more like inherited beliefs, whether it's about money or anything else, is when we find their money ceiling. So I think everybody has a money ceiling, and they also have a money thermostat, like what they're used to being in. So it works on the low end and on the high end. So if you're somebody who you're like, you've never made below 50 grand a year, it's going to be very hard for you to make below 50 grand a year. Just like your brain will find ways to make that amount of money. And conversely, if you've never made 6 figures, it's going to be really hard for you to figure out how to do that and to believe that that is possible. So normally it comes when it's like they're close to full in terms of clients and they've hit, they're making 80 grand a year for the first time ever. It's like double what they've ever made. And we find that they've had a couple sales calls that haven't gone well, and it's like, I think we have hit your ceiling based on some inherited belief about how much you can make as a freelance writer. We probably hit your ceiling, so we got to do some work around how you're thinking about money and how you're thinking about how much is possible to make.
Yeah, no, I like those are really clever ways of talking about it. I love that because it's true, and we see posts on LinkedIn all the time talking about this, right? With people talking about
Mm-hmm.
you have to know your worth, you have to charge your worth, but worth can be relative, right?
Yeah.
There's, the story about the person who has the like old car and their dad is like, well, go offer to sell it here, and then they get a terrible offer, and we'll go offer to sell it to a dealership and they get another bad offer, and they say, all right, now here's this guy I know and he's an antique car collector, go offer to sell it to him and see what he offers you. And it's this tremendous sum, and the lesson there is that your value changes based on whether or not the person you're talking to needs what you have.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the time those beliefs about our own worth are kind of misunderstood, misplaced because we're looking at it the wrong way. And if you're looking at an old mindset that's based in old beliefs, that might be the wrong audience.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's also like a distinction in one of the things that can be difficult when you're running your own business, whatever that looks like, is there's a urge to tie the value of whatever you offer to your own value. So like, this is why normally if you're doing sales and you hear no, why it stings so bad, part of why it stings so bad is that it feels like they're saying no to you personally. And they're saying like, I don't believe that you are that valuable, right? But part of it is we have to separate that. Like, it's you as a human are worthy and valuable, period, right? And then there's like the business element on top of that of like, how am I communicating the value of the thing that I offer? And so it's really interesting, when we get into that kind of separating the self from the business offer and what the value of each of those are. It's really interesting.
Right. And I think that ties in a little bit with what Paul said over here with about relativity and about comparison. We have this this tendency sometimes to link ourselves and our identity to our business success. And then we compare our business success to other people's business success. And then that transfers over and we get kind of trapped in it.
Yeah. 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 And there's that whole thing of like, you should only compare yourself to past versions of yourself, which I love. And a big element of the work that I do with people is also looking at the future you that you want to become and comparing you now to then and saying like, okay, what can I adopt from that future version of myself now that's going to help me get there faster, And for me, that was just like a real sort of mind-blowing thing when I was exposed to that line of thinking, that like I can picture myself at whatever goal that I'm trying to achieve and adopt whatever traits or beliefs or skills I need now in order to get there. It's sort of like the I'll be good with money once I'm a millionaire, instead of like I'll be good with money to become a millionaire.
Here's another good thought from Dr. Subra. Hi, Dr. Subra, by the way. She's coming to us from India. We often tend to undervalue our worth, and mostly our habits and dreams are borrowed. Not even our own. Patrick, I know I've seen you post a lot about this idea too, that like what you are trying to do with your clients is not do it for them, right? Like and we talk about this in coaching, that coaching and consulting, there's a difference. A consultant comes in, you say, what do I do? And they say, you do this, and then you go and do that thing. Coaching is more about empowerment. It's more about helping people understand what they need to do to reach that future self. What other things do you think play into with your clients and working on building that kind of sense of empowerment and their own ability to leave you and then go on and succeed on their own?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's the source of why I'm trying to move away from strategy always. There's like, I do strategy in that, like, here are things that I have seen work. Here are things that I see working currently. And that's all good. But the real work is in how you're thinking about it, how you're thinking about yourself. And the main thing that I've seen is like that idea of stepping into the future self now gives you a better strategy. And also that work of trying to adopt your future self now is about like making it less about specific strategy and more about your resourcefulness, right? And like developing that sense of like, well, me at 100K, 200K, $1 million, whatever, is going to be highly resourceful and not dependent on a single strategy or even specific strategies for anything. Like you can just go out and do. And so one of the reasons that I really love focusing on sales and selling is I think it's such fertile ground for developing your self-concept, because it sort of like money, it really quickly exposes the weaknesses in how you're thinking about yourself and how you're thinking about your future self. And it starts to really get to the core of what you believe about yourself, what you're subconsciously thinking about yourself, and about how you work with people and how you interact in the world. And so I think a lot of that stuff for me in my practice comes through really talking about selling and working through your thoughts about sales,
Are there any kind of common recurring challenges that are specifically sales related that you find people run into?
Yeah. I mean, the main thing is like that sales feels icky, feels gross, feels pushy, feels slimy, that sort of thing. That's very common. It's one that I had for a long time. It's also sort of rooted in like sales feels like I'm trying to convince somebody of something. And all of that goes into sort of an even deeper root of like sales is about me taking money from you, right? That's sort of the core belief that I had and that I see a lot of people have, that like selling is bad because it is me taking something from you. But then when we drill down into what you're selling, whatever it looks like, like if you're selling writing services, whatever money you're earning from doing that, that you're charging for that, the person you're selling it to is getting infinitely higher return on it, right? So like even if you charge like 10 grand for a landing page, if they use that landing page for a year, like they can make hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars off of that landing page. So at its core, selling is about serving your clients. It's about like you actually get the short end of the stick. Even if you're charging really high rates, they're getting a lot more out of it. And once they make that shift, once people can make that shift, it really changes a lot in how you function in your business and how you think about yourself too, because you get to see that when I sell, I serve. And most people want to, in their work, be helping other people in some capacity. And so it really connects to that purpose of like, I'm really helping them, even not just when I'm writing or when I'm doing whatever else that I'm delivering on, I'm helping them by selling to them too, because they're getting so much more out of it than I am, you know?
Right. This is the power of talking about sales as service, is that it's about empowerment. What you're selling is empowerment to whomever your client is, so that they can then take what you've done for them, with them, and then they can go off on their own and make more out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So, I think if I boiled down, all I do is like, if I have a couple of drivers in the business, what my main purposes are, like one of them is definitely shifting the conversation around selling to where it's a selling as service and people are seeing that and seeing the value in it. And if I can sort of make impact in that realm, that's the main driver that I'm after. That, it's helping people, and it is when you do it right and in that way, and that way of serving, it's the most ethical thing you could do. And it's, so really kind of opening up the conversation around selling, that's my main focus in many ways. The other is, I also think that everybody should make a ton of money, and I think that there should be no judgment about that. So that's like those are tied at first of what I'm after.
Right. I think that's something that hopefully all of us can get behind, because I mean that's that mindset thing that you're talking about, right? That there's a lot of guilt around making money for some people. That often goes hand in hand, especially with creatives, because we have this idea of the starving artist, that if you're a writer, if you're a poet, if you're a prose writer, if you're a painter, if you're a photographer, a musician, you shouldn't be making money, because if you're making a lot of money, you've sold out, right? Like that's the fear.
Right, right. And one of the things that I like to push back on that starving artist thing is, when you look back at the history of artists over time, they had very cushy lives. So like if you look at Bach or Beethoven or like any number of painters, like they got to live at the king's mansion and create all day. It was like way cushier than most people, like your blacksmith or whatever, who was doing hard labor all the time. Artists have actually always been incredibly wealthy and well respected. Um and so I always loved, like I had that same starving artist narrative, and then you look at it and it's like their lives were very good comparatively. They were very wealthy people. Everything was taken care of. They had benefactors and stuff. So like we should carry that into the future instead of the starving artist trope.
That's a good story to bring back up, because like that was the thing back then, is that the monarchy or whomever would patronize these artists precisely because of how much value they saw in having a playwright around, having a painter on hand, right? Having a musician, having a bard to write you songs. Like you paid them, you took care of them, you provided for them, because what they gave held such high value.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think that that's the case now. We just have to return to that conversation over the creatives don't make a lot of money conversation. Like it's totally within the power of the creatives in the world to shift back to that original conversation of like the value offered is immense, and so they should be compensated as such.
Well, I mean, there's a writer's strike going on in Hollywood right now that's making this very case, right? We deserve to be paid more because of the value that we're bringing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
So we're getting down towards the end of our time. I know there's a couple of things that we wanted to hit. One is, Patrick, you have got a new thing coming out in 10 days, right? A new group program called Make Money as a Writer. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Make Money as a Writer is a group program. It's basically through all my one-on-one work with writers, I've distilled down the commonalities of what helps them make progress. So there are 5 steps to sort of the curriculum that we teach. And it avoids the unnecessary stuff. Like often we think we need a huge portfolio, like a perfect website, perfect marketing strategies. But what we really focus on are 5 things. First is making a really irresistible offer, and it's framing it in terms of how it serves your clients. So we make the offer, then we go into finding and attracting clients, and that's where we start to divorce from the idea of convincing somebody. Then we go into how to do non-icky sales, really selling a service. Then there's a module on a business owner mindset. So taking the leap from I'm a freelancer who works for other people to I'm a business owner who partners with other business owners. And then finally, we talk about money. There's a whole module on money and identifying what's holding you back with money. So the container is, there are over 10 hours of video modules. There are, all sorts of worksheets and stuff that go with them. There's also a 24/5 Ask Me Anything feature, so you can send in questions you have and they get answered. A private LinkedIn community and weekly group coaching calls. And the fun part is that it's lifetime access. So it's $2,000. It's actually $1,995. So it's $1,995, and you pay that $1,995 either in full or in payments, and it includes everything, and you get it for life. So 5 years from now, you could hop on a group call when you have a random question and you don't know where to go. You've still got access. And for I'm all about selling, so I got to throw in a special offer. So for folks who are listening now, people who signed up, I've got a special offer. If you pre-enroll this week, I'll throw in a free 1-hour one-on-one coaching call before we get started. So the full launch is May 15th. So if you pre-enroll, then you get a free 1-hour call with me to sort of strategize and hit the ground running. And my goal for everybody is once we start May 15th, we'll do a 2K in 30 days challenge. I want everybody to make back their investment in the first 30 days and then go from there. So it'll be real fun once we get going.
Nice. I love the price too. I graduated high school in 1995. That's a great price point.
It's just what the payments ended up working out to that number. Okay, whatever.
So Patrick, if anybody listening wants to get in touch with you, or if they know anybody that this might be a good fit for and they want to put those people in touch with you, what is the best way to reach you?
Yeah, so you can always DM me on LinkedIn. I check those very regularly. There's also a link on my profile on LinkedIn that takes you to the landing page. It's patrickneiljones.com/makemoneyasawriter, but the link is right there. And you can sign up directly on the page. You can also schedule a time to chat too. I'm happy to talk about it with anybody too. So I'm always around in Linky land.
Awesome. Good stuff. So last thing, I've asked Patrick, as is going to be my pattern, to drop us a little nugget of his wisdom, some advice, something he'd like us to take with us. Patrick, I'm going to give you the whole screen and let you lay it on us.
Okay. So I was thinking, okay, what are a few things? I'm having trouble narrowing it down. So I might give you a couple little sound bites here, okay? So one is, if you are not sold on what you're offering, then you can't expect anybody else to be sold on it. Okay, so if you're struggling with knowing how to sell, feeling good about selling, and struggling with that whole idea of selling what you offer, I would say the first step is sell yourself. Overcome your own objections and see why what you offer is so valuable. Okay. The other thing, 2 more things. Okay. Another clip is, something that I've been talking about a lot with clients lately is often we look to make the right decisions as business owners. And I want to challenge that and say it's less important that you make the right decisions. It's more important that you make your decisions right. Okay. And then finally, which actually one of my clients told me that's a Dr. Phil quote. Apparently, I didn't know that. But okay. And then the final thing, which is really life changing, was really life changing for me, and why I do this is that realizing that every thought that your brain has, every thought that your brain offers to you and you think is optional. Often we accept it as either this is an intrusive thought and I definitely don't believe it, with like some real negative stuff sometimes, or we accept it as that is fact, right? Like it's hard to make money as a writer. You might accept that as fact, but the biggest mindset shift you can have is to realize that it's just a thought that your brain threw out and it's totally optional. You get to choose whether you want to pick that up or if you want to put it down and say that doesn't serve me.
Awesome. Thanks, Patrick. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate all of that wisdom. Appreciate the conversation. Everybody in the audience, thanks for being here, you guys. Paul, Jeremiah, Dee, Brian, Sam. It's good to see all of you guys. Thanks for being here. Please come back next week when Caitlin Richards will be here, and we will talk about branding and careers and content creation. All right, everybody, have a great Wednesday.
Cool.